We are entrusting the day and the endeavor to the Lord. Let's go. Welcome to my channel where I visit many good books but live in the Bible. My name is Sarah Christine, and today I would like to talk about Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. I picked this up for a class on imagining the apocalypse, and it marked a lot of firsts for me. This was my first Octavia Butler, my first time reading an Afro-futurist text, and my first time finding out mid-read that a series was incomplete, and I'm still planning to read what's left. It was also my first time reading a book where the formation of an entirely new religion is central to the story. That religion is Earthseed, and it is shaped and expressed by Parable of the Sower's protagonist, Lauren Olamina, though, fun fact, since this book was published in 1993, there have been in real life people who believe in and practice Earthseed. Personally, my feelings about Earthseed can be summed up in a Bruno Mars parody. If you know his song, I Just Might, in my head I was like, may I just say that your faith had me so intrigued. I'm so intrigued. But what good's your God if he doesn't care you're suffering? I don't want to know, girl. So please don't tell that to me. Because it should break your heart, break your heart, break your heart that he is not moved. Yeah, and if there's one thing that is unabashedly true, it is that the God of Earthseed does not care about you. As Lauren herself says on page 25, my God doesn't love me or hate me or watch over me or know me at all, and I feel no love for or loyalty to my God. My God just is. As one of the other characters says when Lauren explains Earthseed to him on page 221, your God doesn't care about you at all. Lauren's like, correct. That is exactly it. That's a toughie, because if there is one thing that is true about the world Octavia Butler presents, which weirdly enough is set from 2024 through 2027, so we've got things to look forward to, fam. It is that in this world, a little TLC, a little tender loving care, really would not go amiss.
You need a hug.
Allow me to set the scene. It is 2024 in the great state of California, which in totally dystopian fashion has been overrun by roving gangs and by people addicted to drugs, except for a few walled communities where people continue to live in relative peace and prosperity. Who could imagine that?
Inconceivable!
Anywho, our girl Lauren Olamina lives in one such walled community with her Baptist preacher father, her stepmother, and her half-brothers. And there, the neighbors may not all like or respect one another, but they hang together because they know that beyond the walls of their community, it's danger, danger. Most of the folks within the community think that they will be able to continue this way forever, but Lauren's like, I know better. The security that we are currently experiencing is an illusion, and sooner or later, the walls are gonna fall, or the desperate and envious people outside are gonna come over the top. And Lauren, for one, is gonna be ready when that shoe drops. As readers, we're provided with what Lauren is reluctant to express to her family and friends. That is, contingency plans for the walls coming down, and also the revelation and development of her religion, Earthseed. That's because Parable of the Sower is told through Lauren's journal entries, so we are really inside her head, and as a consequence, we get an up-close and personal look at her ends, her means, and what she's missing in her quest to survive reality and to spread Earthseed. And those three things, Lauren's ends, her means, and what she's missing, are what I would like to talk about in greater depth today. But before I do that, I have to say that while I did not agree with Lauren much, I admired her a lot. Specifically, I admired the fact that, one, she could suffer well, and two, that she was dangerous to evil. With respect to Lauren's ability to suffer well, throughout Parable of the Sower, we see instances where Lauren, despite her condition of hyperempathy, which means she feels other people's pain literally, like whether that's a bullet or a broken leg, we see her experiencing those things, but pushing through the suffering, not getting waylaid or wallowing. And with respect to Lauren being dangerous to evil, we see an instance where a gang member snatches a child in front of her, clearly intending all manner of harm. We're talking like assault, murder, cannibalism. Lauren does not hesitate to eliminate. So yeah, our girl is able to suffer well, and she is dangerous to evil, which are two traits that I really respect, and I've kind of been obsessing about them ever since I saw this documentary on the Free Burma Rangers. If you have not seen it, go watch it. It is on Amazon and I think also Pureflix, but basically it follows these men and women who are in real life heroes that not only bring the gospel, but they also know how to suffer well and are dangerous to evil. Like, they're not gonna let something like a bullet through the leg stop them from keeping a little girl safe. And if ISIS or the Burmese government decides that they want to abuse and murder innocents, the Free Burma Rangers will employ some pew-pew to get them to reconsider that decision. Watch the documentary. But back to Parable of the Sower, I was and am a big admirer of Lauren's grit and of her no-tolerance policy when it comes to assaulting, murdering, eating kids. But having said that, Lauren and I would not see eye to eye on her larger outlook on life, beginning with the end she has in mind, which she states several times, and it is, quote, "I mean to survive." On one hand, fair enough. I mean, given the world that Lauren has grown up in, it makes sense that you would make such a resolution, particularly if you do not want to be, as Lauren tells one of her Pollyannish friends on page 55, batted around by crazy people, desperate people, thugs, and leaders who don't know what they're doing. In the spirit of surviving, Lauren has been amassing knowledge within the community from books or other people about how to survive on the outside, and she has also prepared an emergency pack that is ready to grab and go at a moment's notice, filled with things like money, medicine, and seeds. Lauren's foundational premise is, as she says on page 59, nothing is going to save us if we don't save ourselves. That's where my quibble would come in because, I mean, we just celebrated Easter, the resurrection of Jesus, who is, on the Christian telling, Lord and Savior, but Lauren's religion of Earthseed's God is not like that. As we have already said, Lauren's God does not care and does not help. On Earthseed's account, it really is, you gotta save yourself. With no God of infinite grace coming down to save the day, surviving in 2024 through 2027's brutal landscape really is a zero-sum game. And when Lauren's dire prediction comes to pass and the walls of her community collapse, she quickly finds that though she may mean to survive, on the outside of the walls that have protected her whole life, she's got to be mean to survive. Yeah, we gotta add an apostrophe M to that initial resolution. Not just I mean to survive, but I'm mean to survive. And that can wear on a heart and mind when Lauren and two of the surviving members of her community team up and agree to travel north together. One of them, a guy named Harry, gets frustrated and fed up with Lauren's new us versus them and guilty until proven innocent mindset that she is using to approach outsiders. And when he expresses his frustration, Lauren tells him on page 181, Harry, your mind is still back in the neighborhood. And the neighborhood is gone. It is a new dawn, it is a new day, but unlike Nina Simone, nobody is feeling good. Even Lauren doesn't relish being suspicious of and callous towards everyone, but she's like, I mean to survive and to accomplish that, particularly when no one, least of all God, is coming down to lend a hand. She's like, we've got to have an edge. On page 223, Lauren thinks to herself, we aren't gang types. I don't want gang types with their need to dominate, rob, and terrorize. And yet, we might have to dominate. We might have to rob to survive and even terrorize to scare off or kill enemies. We'll have to be very careful how we allow our needs to shape us, but we must have arable land, a dependable water supply, and enough freedom from attack to let us establish ourselves and grow into Earthseed. And that's the thing. Lauren's most imminent end is to survive the trip up north, but that isn't her ultimate goal. Her ultimate goal is the proliferation of the creed in which she believes. Lauren wants to spread Earthseed. Therefore, to achieve both her ends of surviving and spreading Earthseed, Lauren is going to adopt a means that has been favored by lots of religious minorities throughout history. And it is the holy huddle. Which again is understandable given the circumstances, but I don't think holy huddles are ideal because they tend to require selectivity and seclusion. And as an evangelist, I'm not really a fan of either of those things. I don't like to draw in-group, out-group lines and then take the inners and go hide. Just not my vibe. But that is what Lauren and her crew choose to do. And again, I get it because for as long as Lauren can remember, her experiences have taught her that in this world, only hurt comes from without your community, and help only comes from within. On page 286, Lauren says, "The world is full of crazy, dangerous people. We see signs of that every day. If we don't watch out for ourselves, they will rob us, kill us, and maybe eat us. It's a world gone to hell, and we've only got each other to keep it off us." From Lauren's perspective, the holy huddle is essential for survival in a world gone to hell. And thus, Lauren is going to select people who are, to use the definition of holy, set apart, and then take the people to a secure location where they will not be torn apart. When selecting her fellow travelers and potential Earthseeders, Lauren is looking for two things that set them apart. The first is that they are worth their keep. For instance, Harry, the guy from the neighborhood who was getting stroppy about Lauren's us versus them mentality, is a big white man, and so is, as Lauren says on page 193, worth some trouble to keep in the caravan. And the second thing is that these people have a degree of dependency. What Lauren wants, as she says on page 207, are people who need us more than we need them. The demographics of Earthseed's eventual caravan bear that out. We get a mixed-race couple with a little baby, two sisters who are running from an abusive father, two escaped slaves with their kids, and a widower in his late 50s with whom Lauren begins a relationship. All of these people are set apart because they are worth their keep and have some degree of dependency. And once they, the holy, have been selected and collected, the huddle part can be established. This is where the seclusion bit of the holy huddle comes in, because as they have traveled north, Lauren and co. have seen the visible communities along the road get attacked and or burned and or pillaged. So they have learned the value of a discreet location. And fortunately enough for Lauren, the widower that she has taken to bed, a man named Benkole, has a piece of land that is off the beaten path. The holy few make their way there through foes and fire and huddle in, and thus the first Earthseed community begins. And you really do hope that things go well for them. I mean, after all of that, after everything that they've been through, I'm like, I don't want to be a party poop, but I foresee an issue. And it's something that neither Lauren nor Earthseed ever address. And it is that if you want something to take root, it's not just the seed that matters. The soil matters too.
Much out of dirt.
When it comes to soil mattering, it could actually be argued that the parable from whence this novel takes its name, the parable of the sower, could be called the parable of the soils instead. I'll read it to you and you'll see what I mean. Conveniently, Octavia Butler concluded the novel with the parable, and this is what it says. "A sower went out to sow his seed, and as he sowed, some fell by the wayside, and it was trodden down, and the fowls of the air devoured it. And some fell upon a rock, and as soon as it was sprung up, it withered away because it lacked moisture. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up with it and choked it. And others fell on good ground and sprang up and bore fruit 100-fold." Interestingly, that translation omits the word soil entirely. Other translations have it, but in this one, it's kind of conspicuously absent. And it made me think that maybe we're supposed to read that conclusion not as belonging to Butler, but as belonging to Lauren, because our girl Lauren is also not keen on talking about soil. Lauren wants to do the sowing and talk about seed. Earthseed specifically. Lauren doesn't want to address the fact that the soil, that is, the people she hopes to sow with Earthseed, may be wayside, rocky, thorny, or otherwise adverse to growth, as described in the biblical parable. She wants to believe that her creed, Earthseed, will take root. The essentials of Earthseed are, as Lauren tells Benkole on page 261, to learn to shape God with forethought, care, and work, to educate and benefit their community, their families, and themselves, and to contribute to the fulfillment of the destiny. The destiny of Earthseed, as Lauren says elsewhere, is to take root among the stars. And Benkole says, and why should people bother about the destiny, far-fetched as it is? What's in it for them? A unifying, purposeful life here on earth, and the hope of heaven for themselves and their children, a real heaven, not a mythology or philosophy, a heaven that will be theirs to shape. Or a hell, Benkole said. His mouth twitched. Human beings are good at creating hells for themselves, even out of richness. He thought for a moment. It sounds too simple, you know. You think it's simple? I asked in surprise. I said it sounds too simple. It sounds overwhelming to some people. I mean, It's too straightforward. If you get people to accept it, they'll make it more complicated, more open to interpretation, more mystical, and more comforting. Not around me, they won't, I said. Oh, to have the surety of an 18-year-old again. I mean, what's that Taylor Swift line? How can a person be 18 and know everything and nothing at 22? I feel like that awakening is gonna come for Lauren, and when it does, it's gonna be rude. Anywho, what I mostly wanted to talk about in highlighting that conversation between Lauren and Bankole was the fact that Lauren never addresses the point, and it's an apt one, that Bankole made about human beings' propensity for turning Edens into hellscapes. For the record, Bankole is not in any way religious. He's just like, from testimony of history, personal experience, and observations, human beings seem more hell-bent than heavenly. In that respect, Bankole is very much like the late great writer Dr. Samuel Johnson, who observed when he was asked about original sin that there was no point in talking about it because it was so axiomatic. Johnson said that with respect to original sin, the inquiry is not necessary, for whatever is the cause of human corruption, men are evidently and so confessedly corrupt that all the laws of heaven and earth are insufficient to restrain them from their crimes. But Lauren, unlike Bankole and Johnson, is not interested in talking about humanity's wayside rocky thorniness. When Bankole makes his comment about human beings being more hell-bent and then pauses and says, you know, Earthseed also sounds too simple, the latter point is the thing that Lauren chooses to address. The sinful soil of the human heart, that just gets left. Which makes me suspect that however much Lauren believes in and tries to shovel down Earthseed, there is a less than utopic future in store for her fledgling community. And that's not just me. I mean, Octavia Butler herself said in an interview that, quote, "I find utopias ridiculous. We're not going to have a perfect society until we get a few perfect humans. And that seems unlikely." I agree. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that's not just unlikely, that's an impossibility. Because the testimony of the Bible is that there has only ever been and will only ever be one perfect human being. And that is our man, JC. However, we shouldn't be discouraged by the fact that there will never be another perfect human being, because the thing about Jesus is that he is great at gardening. In fact, when Jesus came out of the tomb in John 20:15, Mary mistook him for the gardener, which makes total sense because he is the great gardener, capital G, who is able to take the soil of our sinful hearts, which is wayward, rocky, and thorny, and make it instead new and capable of flourishing. Like Ezekiel 36:26 says, God will give us a new heart and a renewed right spirit within. He will remove our hearts of stone and give us a heart of flesh. And into that new heart and renewed right spirit within, our great and caring gardener lovingly sows true and good and life-giving seed that will bear fruit 100-fold and grow for eternity. So if you are like, my heart and soul are looking asphalt-esque, arid as all heck, with thorns like Sleeping Beauty's castle growing all over it, I pray that you would come to Jesus, who is not just the sower, but the lover and the savior of our souls, and who can, like Isaiah 43:19, and this shirt, which I got from the Water Buffalo, says, make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the wasteland. And that'll still be true in 2027. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this was edifying, encouraging, and entertaining, and I hope you will continue to join me as I visit many good books, but live in the Bible. And into that nude heart, I think not. I didn't even have to steal the shirt. The Water Buffalo gave it to me.